Thank you, Anantaji, and thank you, Sheetal, for introducing me to you. This is the first time I've been doing this talk across the world, and this is the first time somebody's made a connection between my work and my name. Uh, so thank you very much. I was just wondering at what point will somebody make connection. So thank you for that. Sometimes as children, we don't really, and they tell our parents that, your name will have an impact on your child's life. And here I am with that. And so this journey, if I can start my screen share, I'll just do that, and share with you all what I've been working on. And here I am. Yeah, you can see the screen. Okay, so the participants can see my screen now.
Yes, we can.
So, this talk revolves around two things, and the idea is to be able to connect this whole question of water, which everybody tells us today is the most critical question of our times, where the next set of wars they're saying might be about water, and there's a lot of media coverage about how there is the one fundamental problem, which is the idea of scarcity of water. Reduced rainfall is said, change in patterns. And recently in the newspaper, many of you might be aware, this whole problem of Joshimat, where it is also said that many of those large-scale hydrological projects may have caused some of the problems. So everything somehow seems to come back to the idea of water and the whole problem of how precipitation, even rainfall, has either shifted, changed its patterns, and how we want to be able to deal with those changes. The global water stress map puts us at very highly stressed. You can see India over here. I mean, apart from the desert regions, we are very, very stressed in terms of water resources. And if remedial measures are not taken with increased urgency, the situation is only going to get worse. At the core of providing India's problem of providing water is the problem of safe and sustained source of water. We make these goals, but over a period of time, we've mined so much of groundwater that the aquifers are failing to recharge. And women are at the core of these conflicts of water, where every day they have to spend hours uh, in conflicts, physical harm to themselves, actual time of the day, whereas they could be doing many other things. So this, and particularly the marginalized and the poor people, get affected even more. Increasingly, measures for water management are seen only as government responsibility. So, we keep waiting for the government announcements to tell us how and where we will get our water. Research into the issues related to water reveals a very strange paradox. On the one hand, we want and require more quality of water, and on the other hand, apart from using water from the tap, we actually have no cognizance, no experience, no tactile relationship with water, except sometimes rain and some few rituals associated with purification, and then, of course, the highly curated, designed instances during vacations, which are very highly aestheticized. The modern lives are only about the use of water without any of the associated experiences. Because we receive water in a tap, our relationship with water is subsumed into a relationship of consumer and consumed. We only look at it as a product to be used. And our knowledge is limited to a numerical, how many liters, how many households, how much water is there in a reservoir. And all the design efforts are only towards designing different kind of taps that go into the household. No thought is given to the water that emerges. And further, we continue to litter our environment with eyesores with no consideration of the contribution to the overall urban environment in which we live. So, if all these difficulties were there, what is it that I'm trying to say then? I'm trying to say that traditionally it was not the case. So we need to learn something from our history. For that, deep research was required, which is what my work has been. So, what is this water and how was it part of people's life? Let's look at the traditional paradigm. One of the earliest expressions of constructing an anthropogenic association with harvesting and distributing and storing water is from the Harappan civilization. I don't know whether Sheetal, in her recent visit to the run, got a chance to visit this,
Yes, yes, I
but
visited.
you did know
Yes.
those 14 reservoirs. 14 reservoirs are created in a little place in Dholavira, and they are across two monsoon embankments, and you can see the extensive amount of resources and energy that civilization would have put into creating a very sophisticated system, which also had engineering skills and craftsmanship. So it's not like we did not have technology or we did not have craft skills or engineering in our history. This is 5,000 years old. In many parts of the country, even a simplest element like a well was elaborated and a socio-cultural value was incorporated. Pavilions for travelers to rest, minarets to mark the location, high plinths into which people carved out shops. So an economic purpose was also added to the place of water. Of course, most of us might have come across temple tanks, which are a common feature, particularly in South India. This is in Hampi, where there is a whole sense of reinforcing the idea of the temple, the idea of space, where it creates a monumentality to the temple, the whole idea of expanse of water, the contemplative and pervasive indwelling spirit of nature, and the amalgamation of the human body with the elements of nature, sun, water, and sky. And this posture of communion and oneness is an embodiment of the Indian way of life. It conveys the powerful life giving attribute of water while simultaneously layering it with qualities of purification. And this posture has been translated and transferred into a whole series of architecture, that is the kund or the talab or the bowl. And now we shall see how it has happened. The perpetual presence of whole idea of crystallization of that image is through, for example, the ghats across so many of our rivers, where it creates a zone between land and water. Many of you may know the story of Narsimha, right? Where this whole idea of this avatar is created in order to destroy the negative of on the world, where it was a in-between zone between at the threshold between inside and outside, between morning and evening. So the idea of the in-between has been a very important aspect of Indian life, our everyday life, our mythology, and our belief systems. High craftsmanship. This is also the Ranki Vav, which is also a UNESCO heritage site. All of this now, the question is that what is it that we've lost, and what do we continue to lose because we are indifferent, we neglect, and we say that what is the relevance of this? So the question is that what is it that we can extract from this heritage that we already have? Architecture for water has been mostly understood in its poetic dimensions, the traditional architecture. The impressive visual presence has precluded the understanding of its interface with the larger context and its study for an inclusive, equity based nuances of interconnections and relationships. Moving beyond the formal architectural elements of the isolated entities in the landscape, this research will demonstrate that there is an interconnectedness between these entities. They are locations of socio-cultural activity, and they are actually systems and networks of water infrastructure. To demonstrate the concept, I took up one particular case study in my research work, which is at Jodhpur. Jodhpur, many of you know, is in the semi-desert region, and it has a very kind of sparse and dry vegetation. Amazing craftsmanship craftsmanship in terms of the palace, fort. And within this now, there were about few hundred water bodies that existed. This is some of the previous research that has been done by two particular scholars. One of them mentions more than 400 water bodies. The other one mentioned 200. So when I started my research, actually, there was very little that I could go on, which could give me an anchor. I found an old map, and this was the map which was also with the public health department. That is the department that takes care of these water structures. And only 14 water structures could be seen on the map. While the literature suggested 400, I was wondering where these water are. And my first task was to try and find these water structures. I remember going around in circles near this place, Gulab Sagar, which is in the center of the historic city. And there were two other water structures nearby, but nobody seemed to know about them. Eventually, I did a lot of mapping, and a whole lot of extra or additional water structures that I found have been added to this map. About 42 structures located within the historic city, numerous reservoirs outside the city are mapped. So I had a network of 100 structures now that I could confidently state formed the water structure of these of this to demonstrate what these were the large and small water structures that were there. So, it was important now to start classifying. There were large lakes which were like collecting water from the catchment. From these lakes, waters was transferred into talabs. From subsoil transferring, the water reached the bawdis and the wells, so that water was near almost every household, including houses which had tankas. So now we are beginning to get a sense of how so many water structures were created 500 years ago in order to provide water to a new city that was being established in the desert where we were considered to be cars. This is particularly important because it tells us that such thriving settlements were created not just on the banks of rivers, but even in places where water was scarce due to the ingenuity and the skills of our craftspeople. Another important thing that came out of the study when I was looking at these water structures and their location is to try to understand why they were located in a particular region. They are mostly located in this band from northwest to northeast. And the slopes and all, the map that showed me the slopes and the terrain showed that that is the higher region of the place, and the city is built downstream. So the water is collected at the higher level, and slowly by gradient, it is brought into the city. Today, I had a chance to look at one of the smaller towns putting in place a large scale water infrastructure project. That entire drawing did not have a single contour line. So we have completely disregarded the sense of contours and terrain in our construction and development projects. From the reservoirs, so water is collected in larger reservoirs. From the reservoirs, the water is then sent out into the city. And this is clearly seen when you talk to people that when water goes down in these reservoirs, or if at any chance they are empty, slowly the water will go down into the wells and the step wells. Though initially now these wells are appearing to be isolated entities, you see a pattern that there is a particular gradient that has been the valley that was made into the road. Also, water was allowed to overflow into that so that it reached the lake, and subsoil crevices and the aquifer allowed the water from these reservoirs to go into the wells so that they could be pulled out. So a magnificent architectural expression of a sophisticated and intricate web of water infrastructure can be seen. Outside the city, a similar network can be seen in the placement of reservoirs. So you have a larger reservoir. In order to expand its network, smaller catchment dams are created. And slowly the water through natural channels is brought into the larger reservoir. These are very difficult things to map. They're not as easy. Today we have so much of technology to rely on. This was being done 500 years ago without any access to the kind of technology that we have today. So this is another such context where you have a smaller dam. These smaller dams then enhance the catchment of the larger uh, reservoir. These are the channels. Even today, these channels are being maintained by the Mehrangarh Museum Trust, and water is even today being collected through that channel, through the dams network for the city. So this is the larger reservoir. Through these are the channels. This is all a protected area now under the trust, and water is collected from those little dams brought to the city. People of the city continue to receive water from this. The proximity of the wells to the houses implied multiple visits during the day and meeting with different people each time. This is particularly important considering the fact that women, because Jodhpur and Rajasthan was a traditional society, women stepped out of their homes primarily for two functions, one to get water and the other to go to the temple. And so these places in the city became very important work points for all the women. And even today, and this is a student's work, she mapped these wells 2 years ago. Even today, these wells in the old city continue to be very, very important urban places. In terms of creating a relationship with nature, the reservoir allows us to understand how much water is there. You can see how much can get collected over a period of time, how much has reduced, and it will continuously inform the people how much water is getting collected. So it makes explicit the natural course of water, reminding people of its source, its transience, and the entire cyclical process. It therefore increases and, in a way, imparts the whole idea of frugality where water is concerned. The dynamic and ever changing relation to the landscape and nature is created. The interpretation of the landscape as a provider and the architecture as a place to hold that is created. The rivers that I showed earlier, the small dams. The technology of dams, including sluice gates, overflows, spillways, were known to the karigars of Jodhpur even 500 years ago. This is the Surpura Dam. The tragedy of this dam is that earlier this was a soft soil. Water would percolate from this, and there is a whole settlement of Mandor over here. All the wells in that settlement would get recharged by that reservoir, and people would get water very close to their homes. Most recently, this entire bed concretized. The mix has been top of. Is now again provided to the same households through pipes. Lost that physical connection to the place. We have lost the beauty of the place. Actually, we are doing almost the same thing we were doing earlier. Many of the reservoirs have ghats, which indicates that these are places where people could come and directly access water in order to conclude some of their rituals. And the angle of repose, etc., have been calculated so that these are, in terms of construction and engineering, mass-based dams. This is the Gulab Sagar, which sits in the middle of the city. And it has become a breathing place for the congested city where people come in the evenings to spend time. They feed the fish, they sit, they gossip, they chatter. The built interface provides a very strong boundary in some of these kunds. The steps choreograph the experience of being within a space and yet looking up to the sky. The eye takes in the form and the movement along the ghats, and a sense of poetry and drama is constructed. The play of light and shadow is constructed in a different way in the stepwells, where so many series of pavilions, and this was a stepwell which was in a very poor condition, where many of the young people of the city came together as a community effort in order to clean it up. This step well, you see how clean the water is. Even today, people continue to use the water of this step well. Outside, there is a notice which informs people how to use the water, what are the rules and regulations. The community is able to handle how to control and govern the way in which this water is used so that it remains clean and pure and available to the next generations. And it is so beautifully constructed while fulfilling a very simple and pragmatic function. Jodhpur is thus a hydraulic city, and by the virtue of its ingenuity and acuity, a tremendous and beautiful traditional water structure and water infrastructure network exists. Having spoken about and shown you and demonstrated how these traditional systems worked, what I'm presenting now is what is it that we do as way forward? Because of course, that you recognize and learn from traditional systems, but how do you take it forward? Today, our modern water supply systems are independent, singular, and have completely no connection with us on a daily basis, unlike the multifunctional traditional water systems, which were connected and haptic. In the way forward, what is it that we will want to do? There are three ways in which we can contribute in making water accessible to all the people, in the way that what I presented in the beginning of the talk, it doesn't become a very highly centralized system and does not have as much of a great impact on the environment as it is having today. There are three things that we need to do. We need to address policy where we need to integrate the existing and incorporate the existing systems and knowledge. We need to create community ownership of local people, and we need to create a practice that is going to create not only the repository but integrate this knowledge in everyday working. In terms of policy, there are several water policies which are existing today. There is the National Water Policy, which is currently under scrutiny and is being revised. There, the restoration of the traditional water bodies is still not identified. Their role in being able to provide water is also not identified, though many of them have pumps and water is being extracted from them. It remains a very haphazard and insensitive approach. So something needs to be done in order that this recognition is brought into policy. There is no cognition or association of experiential value of water in everyday life, and the historic systems are ignored, which again needs to be, the new systems are invisible, so we need to bring this spatiality into the new policy. The ASI protects the monuments but is not able to bring the whole use of those monuments, so only iconic and the formal qualities are recognized. In terms of people, there do exist some foundations that are working at the grassroots levels to create water structures localized, but they need promotion, they need support, they need funding. We need act so that awareness is created, and Anantaji is doing a wonderful job here with creating this Nirmal Jal Prayas. More and more such engagement and much larger scale for the that we are. In terms of practice, because I'm a practitioner and want to also know I can contribute as a practitioner. First of all, like what I have done so far, which is to be able to create awareness by actually documenting, recognizing the value, and making it available in the public domain through writing, research, and documentation, conserving and restoring the water structures that exist in a way that they can become part of the water infrastructure. And finally, this is what we do where possible. Gradients are used in order to collect. So this is a new project that we are working on where we had possibility of gradients, and we are going to collect water through these check dams. The streams, we are going to put small check dams through those streams that are there on the gradient, collect the water in a large water structure, and put our housing around it. In another project, we were able to look at again the water contours and the gradients and create this. There was this one stream that was bringing water from outside the site. Today, what happens many often, we create compound walls. These become like dams. And so there is flooding created somewhere, and we lose the opportunity to get the water going into the river or other streams. So this is an example of how water was used as a key site organization element, such that all the housing was then compactly put along the water edge, and other institutional elements were organized. I would like to thus end my talk. Can we rejuvenate the quality of our connections with our ancestral and fundamental bond between the city and its waters? This was a small and created in order to bring out the rather sad conditions that many of our historic systems are in. Thank you very much.